She walked into my yard like it was a resort and told her guests, "Don't worry, the pool's ours today." No text, no permission, just pure entitlement. So I did the only thing that made sense. I drained the entire pool right before her party started. When she saw the empty shell, she lost it and actually called the cops. Spoiler, they laughed too. There's something deeply satisfying about homeownership. Not just the house itself, but the little freedoms that come with it. The sound of your own music playing in your backyard. The familiar rhythm of your sprinkler on a summer evening. And in my case, the ripple of a private pool catching the sunlight just right. When I bought this house 7 years ago, I didn't care about square footage bragging rights or whether my mailbox matched my neighbor's. I was looking for peace, privacy, a place where I could swim a few laps after work, host a quiet barbecue on the weekend, and go inside without worrying that anyone was watching. The backyard sealed the deal. A decently sized in-ground pool, surrounded by pavers and framed with hedges. It wasn't Olympic grade, but it was mine. No lifeguards, no signupseats, no family hours posted on a bulletin board. Just blue water, a few deck chairs, and the kind of silence you don't realize you need until you have it. At the time, the neighborhood was quiet. Families, retirees, a few kids riding bikes up and down the cul-de-sac. There wasn't even an HOA when I moved in, just a loosely organized neighborhood committee that sent out lawn maintenance tips and occasional flyers for lost cats. That changed about 3 years after I settled in. It started small. A group of newer residents decided to formalize the neighborhood's upkeep. A few bumpy sidewalks were getting complaints. Trash cans are being left out too long. Someone wanted to pressure wash the faded entry sign. All reasonable enough. So when they proposed forming an official HOA, limited in scope, just to manage communal upkeep and minor visual standards, it didn't seem like a big deal. I didn't vote against it. I probably should have. At the time, it felt harmless. We were promised that it would stay non-intrusive. No extreme landscaping codes. No mandatory paint palettes. No micromanaging of private spaces. Just light oversight, they said. Maintenance of shared spaces. But like anything dressed up in soft language, the moment it was voted in, it started creeping outward. And leading the charge? Karen. Karen didn't start as a tyrant. She was the type who smiled through her teeth and wore pastel sweaters even in the summer. Always armed with a clipboard. Always bringing cookies to meetings, the kind that somehow tasted like they came with a contract. She was voted in as president within months of the HOA forming. And from that point forward, the line between shared interest and shared property got blurrier by the week. She'd stroll down the sidewalks with a notepad, jotting down things like grass too tall or decorative flags exceed size limit. She'd leave notes on doors about unsanctioned Halloween decorations and non-neutral flower pots. I kept to myself. I didn't attend the meetings. I didn't challenge her. I didn't need to, because none of it applied to me. Or so I thought. My pool sat on private property, enclosed by fencing that was there long before the HOA even existed. The title to my house clearly outlined the property line. There were no easements, no shared access clauses, no carve-outs for neighborhood use. Just a house, a yard, and a pool I paid to install, heat, clean, and insure. But that didn't stop Karen from developing a curious relationship with the concept of ownership. She started making subtle comments during her walks. Things like, your pool has such great central positioning. If this were a shared space, it'd be perfect for community events. Or, with the HOA's summer calendar shaping up, it's always nice to know which residents are team players when it comes to hospitality. I'd smile politely and nod, assuming she was just fantasizing about things that would never happen. But the longer I said nothing, the bolder she became. One afternoon, I came home to find her on the other side of my backyard fence. Not inside the yard, thankfully, but close enough to be peering in like a kid outside a candy shop. "Oh," she said with mock surprise. "I was just admiring how clean you keep this pool. It really is the crown jewel of the neighborhood." I didn't say much, just asked her kindly not to linger near the fence line again. She gave a tight smile and walked away. It wasn't long after that when I started hearing rumors. Someone on the HOA board mentioned a neighborhood pool day being added to the summer calendar. Another resident asked me casually if I'd be hosting the HOA social this year. I laughed it off at first, thinking maybe they misunderstood something, until the flyers showed up. They were printed on pastel cardstock and slipped into every mailbox. Right at the top, in bubbly bold font, Summer Splash Social, hosted at the community pool. Saturday, 1 to 5 p.m. Snacks and games provided, BYOT, bring your own towel. And beneath it, my address. There was no invitation, no request, no knock on the door or friendly chat. Just an assumption that Karen, self-anointed president of the HOA, could declare my personal pool a public venue because she wanted a party. The flyer made it seem like a done deal, like my property was now fair game for whoever wanted to splash around and eat chips on my deck furniture. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was stunned. The arrogance it takes to claim something you don't own, use it to host an event, and not even have the courtesy to ask. That was when I realized this wasn't just overreach. This was territorial theft in a sundress. I confronted her the next morning, not aggressively, just firmly. I asked why she was advertising my address as a community gathering point. She smiled and said, "Well, it's such a lovely space, and we figured you'd be happy to share, for the good of the neighborhood." I told her plainly, the pool was not a community amenity. It was on private land, and the event would not be taking place. Her smile thinned. "We'll see what the board has to say. This might set a precedent about being neighborly." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. But I did go home and start making a plan. Because if Karen wanted a splashy HOA party in my backyard, she was going to find out what a dry deck really looked like. If I thought the pastel flyer was a one-off, some misguided attempt at being inclusive, I was wrong. Dead wrong. Because within days of confronting Karen and telling her in no uncertain terms that the community pool party would not be happening at my private home, the flyers didn't stop. They multiplied. Not only did she not cancel the event, she doubled down. A second batch of flyers arrived in the mail, this time printed on glossy paper. The title was now Pine Hollow Annual Pool Bash, with the date circled and bolded in red. My address was listed again, along with a schedule that included 1 p.m., welcome and group cannonball. 2 p.m., HOA president speech. 3 p.m., flow-tie races and grill station opens. 4 p.m., open mic talent show, all ages welcome. Open mic. On my pool deck, there was even a note at the bottom. Kindly bring your own beverages. Chairs and shade provided courtesy of our gracious host. That gracious host was me, apparently, without ever agreeing to it. I don't lose my temper easily. But reading that flyer was like being slapped in the face with your own property deed. This wasn't just presumptuous. It was delusional. Karen had taken my polite no, discarded it like junk mail, and decided to march forward as if her imagination held legal weight. And the kicker? Some of the neighbors, particularly the newer ones, believed her. I got texts that week like, "Hey, looking forward to the party. Should we bring extra towels for guests? Do you have an umbrella I can borrow? Karen said the deck gets hot. Thanks for volunteering your place. We're lucky to have you." I didn't blame them. Not really. Most of them had no idea that Karen's authority didn't stretch past her own fence line. They assumed this was coordinated, approved, mutual, because who in their right mind would just claim someone else's backyard? So I did what any sane, deed-holding adult would do. I walked over to Karen's door, knocked, and waited. She opened it wearing a wide straw sun hat, clipboard in one hand, and a lemon water in the other. The full uniform of someone who thought she ran a resort instead of a neighborhood. "Oh, hello," she said too brightly. "We need to talk." Again, her smile barely twitched. "Is this about the event?" I was just about to finalize the RSVP count. I held up the flyer. "Cancel it. This is not happening at my house." She sighed, like I was the one being difficult. "Look, I understand you feel a certain sense of ownership, but community spirit is about shared contribution. We're all part of something larger here. Karen, this is not a shared space. My backyard is private property. I own the land. I pay the taxes. The pool is mine, and mine alone. Yes, but don't you think it's a little selfish to have such a beautiful amenity and not offer it to the neighborhood?" That's when it clicked. To her, the pool wasn't mine. It was something too nice to not be everyone's. I laid it out again, clearly and calmly. I explained the property boundaries, the legal separation from HOA jurisdiction, the fact that I hadn't just declined, I had never agreed to host anything. I told her that if people showed up, they would be turned away. She nodded with a tight jaw. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but the flyers have already gone out, and the neighborhood is expecting this. It would be quite a scene if people were turned away at the gate. She wasn't backing down. She was threatening me, not directly, but with social fallout. Embarrassment. The pressure of being seen as the bad guy for not handing over my home like a rec center. I didn't flinch. Let me be perfectly clear. If a single person steps foot onto my property during your event, they will be trespassing, and I will be making that known to the proper authorities. Karen pursed her lips. I think you'll find that attitude doesn't foster neighborly goodwill. I think you'll find a trespassing charge doesn't care about goodwill. And I walked away. The next few days were strangely quiet. I didn't receive any more flyers. Karen didn't pass by my house. The group chat went silent. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she had come to her senses. Maybe she'd realized she'd pushed too far and canceled the event. But that would have required humility. And Karen doesn't do humility. Saturday arrived, the day of the so-called Pine Hollow annual pool bash. It was a sunny, 84-degree afternoon. Blue sky, light breeze. The kind of day you'd expect to hear splashing and music echoing off the rooftops. But not at my house. Because when Karen's guests showed up, in flip-flops and swim trunks, clutching coolers and sunscreen, they found a sign posted on the front gate. Private property, not affiliated with HOA. No entry without invitation. And beyond the gate, a pool that had been drained that very morning. Bone dry. The sun rose like any other summer morning, but there was an extra sense of anticipation in the air. You could feel it. The breeze was warmer. The birds were louder. The neighborhood was buzzing, but not because of excitement. Because it was the day Karen had promised the entire HOA a pool party at someone else's house. And I had a plan. I'd already arranged for a certified pool technician, a professional I'd used before, to stop by early that morning. Legally, it was my right to drain and maintain my pool whenever I chose. And after the chaos Karen had stirred up, there wasn't a drop of doubt in my mind. This pool was going to be empty. Not roped off. Not temporarily closed. Empty. The technician arrived right at 7:30 a.m. By 9:15, the pump was whirring. The hose was snaking into the backyard drain, and the pool was gurgling like it had a secret. By noon, not a single drop of water remained. Just sun-baked tile, a few dry leaves, and the quiet hum of satisfaction. I posted a single sign on the gate. Pool closed for private maintenance. Do not enter. Trespassers will be reported. No yelling. No confrontation. Just calm, controlled ownership. Then I went inside, brewed a cup of coffee, and waited. It started slowly. A group of 3 showed up first, a couple in their 30s and a teenager dragging a cooler on wheels. They stood outside my gate, clearly confused. The husband read the sign out loud. Maintenance? That's weird. I thought this was the party house. The wife pulled out her phone and showed him Karen's flyer, still saved in her photo album. I watched from the window as they stood there for a few awkward minutes, then turned around and left. But they were only the beginning. Within the hour, the trickle became a flood. More families arrived. Swimsuits, sunglasses, towels slung over shoulders. They were expecting laughter, snacks, and floaties. Instead, they were met with the dull gray of a dry pool and a gate that wasn't budging. Some of them started milling around out front. Others peeked through the slats in the fence, hoping maybe it was just some elaborate joke. And then, like clockwork, Karen arrived. She stepped out of her SUV in full summer spectacle, bright pink visor, clipboard in hand, oversized iced tea in the other. But the second she saw the empty pool, her posture changed. Her mouth opened slightly. Her sunglasses slid down the bridge of her nose. She marched up the driveway like she was storming Normandy. I met her halfway. "What did you do?" she hissed, each word heavy with disbelief. "Pool maintenance," I replied. Calm, direct, unbothered. "You drained it." "Yep. For what reason? To clean it. She gestured wildly to the gate. You knew the party was today. No, you said the party was today. I never agreed. The crowd behind her was watching now. Some confused, others amused. A few were already on their phones, clearly trying to figure out what had gone wrong. Karen wasn't about to let it go. This is unacceptable. The entire community was counting on this. You're sabotaging neighborhood morale. I'm maintaining my property. Something your board should try doing once in a while. That's when she pulled out her phone. You leave me no choice. I'm calling the police. I didn't stop her. She dialed, turned her back to me, and started explaining to the dispatcher that there had been destruction of shared assets and intentional sabotage of HOA-sanctioned events. She kept repeating phrases like community resource and neighborhood property. I stood there, arms folded, watching her pace like she was delivering a press briefing. The officers arrived 15 minutes later. 2 cruisers. Lights off. Calm demeanor. One officer walked up to me, the other approached Karen. We got a report of a disturbance involving a pool and an event. Karen jumped in before I could speak. Yes, he drained the community pool hours before our scheduled event. It's vandalism, possibly theft of services. He's refusing to cooperate with the HOA. The officer turned to me. Can you tell us your side, sir? I nodded, handed him a folder. Inside was a copy of my property deed, my land survey showing the pool clearly inside my private boundary, a paid invoice from the pool technician dated that morning, a printed HOA map showing the pool as not listed under common areas. The officer scanned the papers, lips tightening into a barely hidden smirk. Looks like this is your property, sir. Correct. And there's no agreement, verbal or written, allowing use of this pool for public events? None. In fact, I explicitly told her it wasn't allowed twice. He turned back to Karen. Ma'am, we can't enforce HOA expectations over private property. He's well within his rights. She sputtered. But this is the only pool in the neighborhood, and I had flyers printed. The officer raised an eyebrow. That doesn't make it public. He did this on purpose, to embarrass me. Ma'am, embarrassment isn't a criminal offense. The second officer approached. Everything checks out. No damage. No crime. It's his pool. Karen's face turned redder than the plastic cup she was holding. She turned to the crowd, tried to salvage what she could. Well, since we're all here, maybe we could do something at the Greenbelt? But the energy was gone. Parents were dragging their kids back toward their cars. A few muttered apologies in my direction. One even whispered, she told us you volunteered. Sully, Munn. Within 10 minutes, the yard was empty. The only splash that day was the one Karen made when her authority belly-flopped in front of half the neighborhood. If you ever want to see someone's illusion of power dissolve, don't look for fireworks. Look for silence. That's what happened the day after the so-called Pine Hollow annual pool bash. There were no complaints, no HOA follow-ups, no Karen knocking on doors in her oversized sunglasses demanding signatures or scolding non-compliance. Just silence. And in a neighborhood that was used to pastel flyers, passive-aggressive emails, and yard-walking authority, that silence spoke volumes. By Monday morning, the community had coined a new term, Poolgate. It started as a joke in the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone posted a picture of a kiddie pool filled with garden hoses and captioned it, "Next year's HOA bash," hosted by someone who actually asked first. The post got 38 likes in under an hour. Another resident posted a GIF of an empty Olympic-sized pool with the words, "Karen's party planning. Expectation versus reality." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't mean-spirited. But it was clear the neighborhood had seen through the curtain. One by one, people started reaching out. An older couple from 2 streets overstopped by during one of my afternoon walks. We just wanted to say sorry for all the commotion. We had no idea that flyer was unauthorized. We thought it was something everyone had agreed on. I nodded, told them it wasn't their fault. Karen had made it seem official. A teenage girl who'd been dragged to the party by her parents left a note taped to my mailbox. Sorry you got dragged into HOA drama. Your deck chairs are awesome, though, grinning face with sweat. And the cherry on top, a man named Brian, who just moved into the neighborhood 2 months ago, came over with a 6-pack and said, I brought a peace offering. I think I owe you one after showing up with floaties and asking where the changing room was. We both laughed. That's when I knew the tide had turned. Meanwhile, Karen tried to salvage the narrative. She issued a formal statement through the HOA's email listserv. Due to unforeseen pool maintenance and miscommunication regarding neighborhood resources, the event on Saturday was regrettably canceled. We appreciate the community's flexibility and hope to host future inclusive events with full cooperation and understanding from all involved. It was pure political gymnastics. No apology. No acknowledgement that she'd falsely advertised a private home as a public venue. Just a lot of vague phrasing and passive blame. But the community didn't buy it. In the comments section beneath the email, the replies piled in. Was the miscommunication the part where you didn't ask permission? Next time, maybe check the property lines before planning the open mic. Inclusive is great. So is not lying about what you control. Even people who had previously supported Karen's enthusiasm for community spirit began quietly withdrawing their support. At the next HOA board meeting, held in a modest clubhouse down the road, attendance more than doubled. Normally only 5 or 6 residents showed up. This time, it was closer to 30. Karen walked in late, face rigid, clipboard in hand. But the energy was different. Instead of her usual confident walk to the front, she looked cautious, like someone who'd been told the stage was hers, but now realized the audience brought tomatoes. One of the first items on the agenda, clarification of HOA jurisdiction and private property use. The room was quiet as the board's vice president, a mild-mannered accountant named Greg, cleared his throat. In light of recent confusion, we'd like to confirm that the HOA does not have authority over privately owned properties, including but not limited to yards, pools, driveways, or other non-common spaces. Another board member chimed in. We're working on a revised version of the neighborhood handbook that will include language about requesting, not assuming, resident participation in events. Karen sat there, silent. Not a single resident spoke in her defense. And while Karen didn't lose her title that night, she lost something bigger. Her credibility. She tried hosting a small meet and greet later that month to rebuild community trust. Only 3 people showed up, and one of them only stayed for 5 minutes. She still handed out her signature flyers, but now they were met with eye rolls instead of enthusiasm. The power she once had, the illusion of control built on vague rules and forced friendliness, had cracked. Because when someone's authority is based on fear or assumption, all it takes is a little sunlight and a dry pool to expose the truth. As for me, I didn't celebrate. I didn't boast or gloat or post any snarky comments. I just went back to living. The pool got refilled, slowly, cleanly, professionally. I added a lock to the gate, just in case. Not because I was worried about Karen anymore, but because boundaries, once tested, deserve to be fortified. And as the water reached the tile line and shimmered in the summer light, I took a deep breath. Peace had returned. That weekend, I grilled a few burgers. Just a quiet lunch with 2 old friends who dropped by. No flyers, no announcements, no neighborhood-wide declarations of community bonding. Just the sound of a spatula flipping over meat, the ripple of water, and a soft breeze whispering past the fence. And the best part? Nobody called the cops. Karen didn't announce her resignation with a speech. There was no dramatic exit, no effective immediately email. Just a quiet note tucked into the HOA newsletter. Karen B. has decided to step back from organizing neighborhood events and will no longer serve as chair of the Social Planning Committee. We thank her for her time and enthusiasm. That was it. No mention of Poolgate. No mention of calling the cops on a private homeowner. No mention of the dozens of flyers that had quietly disappeared from refrigerator doors across Pine Hollow. But no one needed an explanation. Everyone already knew. With Karen off the social committee, the tone of the neighborhood shifted. There were still summer gatherings, sure, but they were smaller, more organic, hosted by people who actually asked first. Gone were the mandatory fun flyers and sparkly fonts. Gone were the passive-aggressive RSVPs printed with neighborhood-wide expectations. Now, if someone wanted to throw a barbecue or a block party, they simply sent a message in the group chat, and people came if they wanted. No power trips, no property grabs, just neighbors being neighbors. As for me, I refilled the pool on my terms. Slowly, quietly, no announcement, no grand reopening. I hired the same technician who had helped drain it to come back and get it back to pristine shape, chemically balanced, debris-free, sparkling clear. Then I sat poolside one evening with a beer in hand, watching the soft glow of the setting sun bounce off the water. It wasn't about the pool anymore. Not really. It was about what it represented. This pool, once claimed by someone who believed HOA power could override private property, was still here. Still mine. Still off limits to those who didn't know where the line ended. Funny enough, a few neighbors came by weeks later. Not to swim, but to say thanks. To laugh. To sit on the deck and remember the day Karen called the cops over chlorinated water. One brought a plastic pool float shaped like a judge's gavel. We named it Due Process. Someone else gifted me a novelty sign. Private pool. HOA free since the drain heard round the block. I didn't hang it up, but I kept it. It was a reminder, not just of what happened, but why it happened. Because boundaries matter. Because ownership means something. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's just strategy. I never raised my voice. Never broke a rule. Never gave in to the bait. All I did was protect what was mine, calmly, completely, and without compromise. And in the end, that pool, once the subject of flyers, assumptions, and entitlement, became a symbol. Not of defiance, but of dignity. If someone thinks your backyard is their event venue, remind them, what's yours isn't up for vote. And when they try to take it anyway, don't argue. Just drain the pool, watch the truth come out, and let the law do the rest. Because entitlement only works when it's met with silence. Because someone's clipboard entitled don't mean anything when they're standing on land they don't own. People like Karen bank on politeness. They count on your hesitation. They inflate their influence until you forget where the line was drawn. But here's the truth. A title deed beats a flyer. A property line beats a party plan. And facts, the real, quiet kind, beat every bit of fake authority dressed up as neighborhood unity. I didn't need a crowd. I didn't need to yell. I just needed a dry pool and the right paperwork. So if someone ever tries to plan a party in your space, don't panic. Don't fight. Just flip the pump on. Because nothing empties out arrogance faster than the sound of entitlement circling the drain.